The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Corner Market buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Sarah Martinez clutched the gallon of milk against her chest, her hands trembling. Behind the checkout counter, the teenage cashier's face flushed red with embarrassment while the store manager, Mr. Henderson, tapped his fingers impatiently on the scanner. "Ma'am, your card was declined again," Henderson announced loudly, his voice cutting through the quiet afternoon like a blade. "You need to put something back." In line behind her, an elderly woman sighed audibly. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his Rolex with obvious annoyance. But in the far corner, near the magazine rack, a man in a simple gray hoodie watched the scene unfold with quiet intensity, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Nobody knew that this ordinary Tuesday afternoon would change everything. But before we dive into the story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share more stories. Sarah Martinez was 28 years old, but her worn hands and tired eyes made her look older. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, just to keep her small apartment in Riverside Heights. Her daughter Emma, only 6 years old, was everything to Sarah. The little girl with bright brown eyes and missing front teeth deserved so much more than their cramped 1-bedroom apartment and generic cereal for dinner. Sarah's mind raced as she stared at the milk in her hands. Emma had been asking for weeks about why they always bought the cheapest powdered milk instead of the real stuff like her classmates drank. Today was supposed to be special. Emma had won a reading contest at school, and Sarah wanted to surprise her with real milk for her favorite cookies. But her bank account told a different story. After paying rent and utilities, she had exactly $12 left until Friday's paycheck. Mr. Henderson, the store manager, was a different breed entirely. At 45, he owned a nice house in the suburbs and drove a shiny red pickup truck. He had worked his way up from cashier to manager over 15 years, and somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what it felt like to count every penny. To him, people like Sarah were problems to be solved quickly and quietly. He didn't see the mother desperately trying to give her daughter a small joy. He saw a customer holding up his line and embarrassing his store. "Look, lady," Henderson said, his voice getting louder. "Either you pay for what you can afford, or you need to leave. I've got other customers waiting." The businessman behind Sarah huffed and muttered something about people who shouldn't shop if they can't afford it. The elderly woman shook her head in disapproval. Even 17-year-old Marcus, the cashier, seemed to judge Sarah with his uncomfortable silence. These people saw her struggle and turned away, as if poverty might be contagious. But the man in the gray hoodie saw something different. His name was David Chen, though nobody in the store knew that. They didn't know he had built a tech company from nothing in his garage 12 years ago. They didn't know he was worth over $200 million. They didn't know that he remembered exactly what it felt like to choose between groceries and rent, because he had made that choice many times as a child. David watched Sarah's face crumple slightly as she looked down at her daughter's milk. He saw the way her shoulders sagged with the weight of disappointment and shame. In that moment, Sarah wasn't just another customer to him. She was his own mother 30 years ago, standing in a similar store with similar problems. The tension in the small store grew thicker as Henderson's patience ran out completely. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to make a decision right now," Henderson said, crossing his arms. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never missed a meal or worried about keeping the lights on. "You're holding up my line, and frankly, this is becoming disruptive to my other customers." Sarah's cheeks burned with shame. She could feel every pair of eyes in the store boring into her back. The businessman behind her let out an exaggerated sigh and pulled out his phone, making a show of checking the time. The elderly woman whispered something to her companion about these people who don't know how to manage their money. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maybe I could just put the milk back and—" "You know what?" Henderson interrupted, stepping out from behind the counter. "This happens way too often with people from your neighborhood. You come in here, waste our time, embarrass yourselves, and expect us to feel sorry for you." His words hit like physical blows. "If you can't afford to shop here, maybe you should try the discount store on 5th Street. The cruelty in his voice made Sarah's hands shake harder. She thought about Emma waiting at home, excited to hear about her mother's trip to the fancy store, where they sold real milk in glass bottles. How could she explain that mommy wasn't good enough to shop there? That their money wasn't welcome? Marcus, the teenage cashier, shifted uncomfortably behind the register. He had seen this scene too many times before, but something about this woman seemed different. She wasn't angry or defensive like other customers who got embarrassed. She just looked defeated and sad. Really, really sad. "Sir, maybe we could," Marcus started to say. "Don't," Henderson snapped at his employee. "You're new here, so let me teach you something. The moment you start making exceptions, word gets around. Then every person with a sob story thinks they can come in here and waste our time." Sarah's grip on the milk carton tightened. She thought about the 23 job applications she had filled out last month, looking for something that paid better than minimum wage. She thought about the eviction notice that came last week, a mistake by the landlord's office, but one that still made her panic for 2 days. She thought about Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had gently suggested that Emma might benefit from extra support at home with reading because she seemed tired and distracted in class. The weight of all these failures pressed down on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy blanket. Maybe Henderson was right. Maybe she didn't belong in a place like this. But as Sarah started to turn away, David Chen noticed something that everyone else missed. Despite her obvious embarrassment and financial struggles, Sarah never once raised her voice or became rude. When Henderson insulted her neighborhood, she didn't fight back. When the other customers whispered about her, she didn't defend herself. There was a quiet dignity in the way she handled this public humiliation that spoke to something deeper. David's trained eye, the same eye that had helped him identify promising startups and talented employees, recognized something special about this woman. The way she protected her daughter's feelings, even in her own moment of shame. The way she apologized for a situation that wasn't really her fault. The way she tried to make herself smaller instead of demanding to be treated with respect. His phone buzzed in his pocket. 3 missed calls from his assistant about the board meeting he was supposed to attend in an hour. A meeting where they would discuss the company's new charitable foundation and its mission to support struggling American families. The irony wasn't lost on him. Henderson wasn't finished. "Look, I run a business here, not a charity," he continued, his voice getting louder. "If you want free handouts, there's a food bank on Maple Street. But in my store, you pay for what you take, or you leave." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Emma would ask questions if mommy came home crying, and Emma deserved better than a mother who fell apart in grocery stores. What none of them knew was that David Chen had been in Sarah's exact position 28 years ago, standing in a similar store with his own mother, watching her choose between milk and medicine. David's mind drifted back to 1997, when he was 12 years old and his mother, Linda, cleaned offices for minimum wage in downtown Phoenix. He remembered standing beside her in a grocery store much like this one, watching her count crumpled dollar bills while a manager with the same cold eyes as Henderson told her that food stamps weren't accepted for the items she needed. Back then, David's mother had worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, doing laundry for wealthy families on weekends, and babysitting neighbors' children during the day. She never complained, never raised her voice, and never let David see her cry. But he knew. He saw the way her hands shook when bills came in the mail. He noticed how she ate smaller portions so he could have seconds. He watched her iron his school clothes with extra care because they had to last twice as long as other kids' clothes. His mother had dreams once. David remembered finding her old college textbooks hidden in a closet, psychology and business books with her careful notes written in the margins. She had been 2 semesters away from graduating when she got pregnant with David. His father left before David could even walk, and college became an impossible luxury. "Education is the only thing they can't take away from you," Linda used to whisper to David while helping him with homework at their tiny kitchen table. "Promise me you'll finish what I couldn't." David kept that promise. Scholarships carried him through college and business school, but it was his mother's quiet strength that carried him through everything else. Every late night building his company, every rejection from investors, every moment when success seemed impossible. He thought about Linda Chen, who worked herself to exhaustion so her son could have chances she never got. Now, 28 years later, David stood in Murphy's Corner Market wearing a $15 hoodie and jeans, looking like any other customer. His assistant had been calling all afternoon about the private jet waiting at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, the board meeting in Seattle, the 3 acquisition deals worth over $50 million that needed his signature by Thursday. But all David could see was his mother's face and Sarah's expression, the same quiet dignity, the same refusal to let shame become anger, the same desperate love for a child who deserved better than their circumstances allowed. David's phone buzzed again, a text from his head of security. "Mr. Chen, your 3 p.m. is waiting. Car is outside when you're ready." He typed back quickly, "Delayed. Handle the meeting without me." His security chief wouldn't understand. Neither would his board of directors or the investors flying in from New York. They would think he was wasting time in a corner market when he should be making million-dollar decisions in conference rooms. But David understood something they didn't. Sometimes the most important moments happen in the smallest places. Sometimes changing one life changes everything. He watched Sarah's shoulders sag as Henderson's words cut deeper. The businessman behind her muttered about calling the manager, not knowing Henderson was already there, making things worse. David's jaw tightened. His mother would have handled this situation with grace, just like Sarah was doing. But his mother never had someone with the power to step in and change everything. Sarah did. Sarah took a deep breath and started to put the milk back on the shelf, her hands trembling with embarrassment. That's when David Chen stepped forward. "Excuse me," David said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a calm breeze. He walked toward the checkout counter with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never doubted his right to be anywhere. Henderson barely glanced at him. "Sir, if you're in line, you'll need to wait. We're dealing with a situation here." "I can see that," David replied, his tone still gentle, but somehow carrying more authority than Henderson's shouting had managed, "and I think there might be a better way to handle it." David reached into his back pocket and pulled out what looked like a regular leather wallet. But when he opened it, Henderson's eyes went wide. Inside wasn't just cash. There were multiple black credit cards, the kind most people never see, and a simple white business card that made Henderson's face go pale. "David Chen, CEO of Phoenix Dynamics," Henderson read aloud, his voice suddenly much smaller. "Wait, you're the David Chen?" The businessman behind Sarah stopped checking his phone. The elderly woman's whispered complaints died in her throat. Even Marcus, the cashier, leaned forward to get a better look. David Chen. The David Chen who had been on the cover of Forbes magazine 3 times. The tech entrepreneur who started with nothing and built a company worth over $2 billion. The man whose charitable foundation had donated $50 million to American schools last year alone. "I am," David said simply. He turned to Sarah with kind eyes. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice you're trying to buy milk for your daughter. How old is she?" Sarah blinked in confusion. She's 6. But I don't understand." "6 is a wonderful age," David smiled. "I bet she's proud of her mom who worked so hard to take care of her." He looked directly at Henderson, and his voice grew firmer. "Mr. Henderson, I'm curious about your store's customer service policy. Is it standard practice to publicly humiliate customers who are experiencing temporary financial difficulties?" Henderson's face flushed red. "Mr. Chen, we have policies about declined cards, and I was just—" "You were just what?" David interrupted, his calm tone somehow more intimidating than any shouting could have been. "Making assumptions about this woman's worth based on her bank account? Suggesting she doesn't belong in your store because she can't afford everything she wants for her child?" The store fell completely silent. David continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the small space. "Mr. Henderson, do you know what I see when I look at this woman? I see someone working multiple jobs to provide for her family. Someone who came to your store because she wanted to give her daughter something special. Someone who has more dignity in her little finger than you've shown in this entire interaction." Henderson opened his mouth to respond, but David held up a hand. "I'm not finished. You see, I grew up shopping in stores exactly like this one. My mother counted every penny, just like this lady is doing. And there were managers like you who made her feel small and unwelcome. Do you know what the difference was?" Henderson shook his head, unable to speak. "My mother never had anyone with the power to speak up for her. But this woman does. David pulled out one of his black credit cards and handed it to Marcus. Please ring up everything this lady needs. And while you're at it, add $100 of groceries she can take home to her daughter. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Sir, I can't accept this. I don't even know you. You don't need to know me, David replied gently, but I know what it feels like to be where you are. And I know that kindness is never wasted. He turned back to Henderson, whose face had gone from red to white. Now, Mr. Henderson, I have a question for you. Do you think Phoenix Dynamics should continue using Murphy's Corner Market for our employee lunch catering? We spend about $15,000 a month here, but I'm wondering if a business that treats struggling mothers this way aligns with our company values. Henderson's jaw dropped. $15,000 a month. That was nearly half his store's profit. Mr. Chen, please, I was just following policy. No, David said firmly. You were following prejudice. There's a difference. The power in the room had completely shifted. The businessman who had been huffing impatiently now looked ashamed. The elderly woman stared at David with something like awe, and Henderson looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. David's words hung in the air like a judgment. Henderson's hands shook as he realized what he had done. Insulted and humiliated a customer in front of one of the most powerful businessmen in Phoenix. A man who could end his career with a single phone call. Mr. Chen, Henderson stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. Please, I made a mistake. I was having a bad day, and I took it out on this customer. It won't happen again. You're right, David replied calmly. It won't happen again, because I'm going to make sure of it. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Jennifer, it's David. I need you to contact the owner of Murphy's Corner Market immediately. Tell them we need to discuss their customer service policies and whether we'll continue our catering contract. He paused, looking directly at Henderson. Also, I want a full review of their management practices, particularly how they treat customers experiencing financial difficulties. Henderson's face went white as he realized David was talking to his boss's boss. The store owner, Mrs. Patricia Murphy, had built her small chain of markets over 30 years. David Chen's business was one of her biggest contracts. Within minutes, David's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Mr. Chen, came a worried voice. This is Patricia Murphy. I understand there's been an incident at my Riverside Heights location. David's voice remained calm but firm. Mrs. Murphy, your manager just publicly humiliated a hardworking single mother for having insufficient funds. He suggested she shop elsewhere because people from her neighborhood apparently aren't welcome in your store. Is this the kind of customer service you want associated with your family's name? The silence on the phone was deafening. Finally, Mrs. Murphy spoke, her voice shaking with anger, but not at David. Mr. Henderson, she said, clearly addressing her manager. You're terminated, effective immediately. Clear out your office and turn in your keys. Security will escort you out. Henderson's legs nearly gave out. Mrs. Murphy, please. No excuses, she cut him off. In 30 years of business, I've never been more ashamed of an employee. Get out of my store. Marcus, the young cashier, watched in amazement as his boss, the man who had seemed so powerful just minutes ago, walked away with his head down. The businessman who had been complaining about waiting time quietly left his items on the counter and slipped out of the store without a word, too embarrassed to face anyone after his earlier comments. But the real transformation happened with Sarah. As Marcus rang up her groceries, the milk plus a cart full of food David had insisted on buying, tears streamed down her face. Sir, she whispered to David, I don't know how to thank you, but someday, when I'm back on my feet, I want to pay this forward to someone else. David's eyes softened. Sarah, may I call you Sarah? I have a better idea. My company is always looking for people with strong character. Someone who handles adversity with grace, who puts their children first, who never gives up even when times are hard. Would you be interested in talking about a position with us? Sarah's mouth fell open. A job? But I don't have a college degree. I just clean offices and stock shelves. Some of my best employees started exactly where you are, David smiled. We train people who have the right heart, and I can see that you do. Mrs. Murphy's voice crackled through the phone speaker again. Mr. Chen, I owe you and this customer a personal apology. Sarah, is it? Sarah, I'm offering you Mr. Henderson's position as store manager. Full benefits. Salary twice what you're making now. You clearly understand how customers should be treated. The elderly woman who had been whispering criticisms earlier stepped forward. Honey, she said to Sarah, her voice gentle now, I want to apologize. I judged you without knowing your story. You handled that situation better than I ever could have. Even other customers who had wandered in during the confrontation began clapping. Someone had recorded part of David's intervention on their phone, and by evening, the video would have over 1 million views on social media with captions like, Billionaire defends single mom, and this is what real kindness looks like. As Sarah walked out of Murphy's Corner Market with her groceries and 2 job offers, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for a better future. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez sat in her new office at Phoenix Dynamics as Director of Community Relations. Her job was to identify and help struggling families in Phoenix, the same families she had once been part of. Emma, now 7, attended a private school on full scholarship and came to work with her mom every afternoon, doing homework while Sarah finished her day. David had kept his promise. Sarah's program had already helped over 200 families find jobs, housing, and hope. She called it the Second Chance Initiative, and it was changing lives across the city. Henderson never found another management job. Word had spread quickly through Phoenix's business community about what he had done. But sometimes, Sarah thought, people get exactly what they give to the world. The video of David's intervention had been shared millions of times, inspiring similar acts of kindness across the country. But for Sarah, the real miracle wasn't that David had money or power. It was that he remembered where he came from and used his success to lift others up. Every person has the power to change someone's life, whether through kindness, opportunity, or simply treating others with dignity. The question isn't whether you can afford to help. The question is whether you can afford not to. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that their current circumstances don't define their future. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply treat someone like they matter.